As I put in the promotions that we sent out, Erin is the president of the Vermont Retail and Grocers Association, and executive director of the Vermont Specialty Food Association. So VRGA is, I forget how many years ago it was, Erin, but about the time that you came along, I think, is the combination of two different trade associations, or two separate trade associations into one, because it used to be Vermont Retailers and then Vermont Grocers separately. So now under Erin's leadership, it is one and doing quite well. And you have a large number of members, I mean, including associate members and whatnot of, I don't know, 700 and something different organizations throughout the state that range from very tiny to very large and everything in between. Granted, a lot of them might be associate members, but still you have a really diverse membership.
We do.
Speaking from a desk that deals with one type of member for the most part, I have an appreciation for all the different interests that you have within all of your members and whatnot. So Erin has a background besides running a trade association. She's worked for an AHL hockey team. I didn't know that before I read your bio. So that's interesting. And also for a lacrosse team before. Has had some, let's see, background in marketing and so on and so forth. And I won't go through the whole list, but a lot of extensive and impressive background. And mostly we just want to thank you very much, Erin, for joining us to share some of the story from a different sector of businesses in Vermont with Vermont credit unions today. You know, they know what they've all been dealing with, but it's nice to hear to get your head out of that area and hear, you know, the toils and tribulations of somebody else to see if you're having an easier time or a harder time or about the same. And I'm sure it's about the same for everybody. So thanks, Erin, very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. And yes, my first job out of college, I worked for an AHL hockey team and National Lacrosse League lacrosse team. I did that for about 9 months, and I didn't have a day off for quite some time. And I said, I think I made $19,000 a year, and I didn't have a day off. And I said, I need to do something with my life. So I went back toward the more general marketing and business assistance. I grew up in a hardware store, the self-proclaimed hardware store snob. So, you know, I moved to Vermont just over 10 years ago and had no prospects except for the guy that I moved up here with. He has since left the state, but I luckily fell into the lobbying world. I actually met my first boss at a hockey game. And luckily I landed on my feet and really enjoyed the profession. And so yes, I joined VRGA just about 5 years ago, actually. And right before my joining, I want to say it was about a year prior to that, they had just finalized the merger between the grocers and the retailers. So it was still very much in transition. So you've got two associations merging, and then you have my predecessor, Jim Harrison. I'm sure many of you experienced Jim Harrison in some aspect over the years. He announced his retirement. And so it's been several years of transition. So that in and of itself has been an experience with absolutely no handbook. And so here we are going through the pandemic with no handbook. So it's been a lot of creativity and a lot of communication and a lot of phone calls and emails and a lot of questions, just trying to figure out what everybody has been doing and what works for people and what doesn't work, and sharing that with our members. So Joe had sent me a handful of questions just to kind of guide me through the conversation. I'll touch a little bit on the questions, but I think what's best is probably to give a quick overview and then answer questions and hear what you guys are thinking about or what you might be wondering about in the retail realm. So like Joe said, we do have varied memberships. We have grocers, that can be, the country store or the corner store, all the way up to the large grocery stores here in Vermont. We've got general retailers, the touristy retailers like Stowe Mercantile and Stowe, and anywhere between clothing or bookstores. And then we've got distributors, mostly food distributors. We also, like Joe shared, we administer the Specialty Food Association, so those are members as well. And then general business services are members. So the grocers during the pandemic obviously had we're in a unique situation. They stayed open right straight through, and they did their best to get people through the pandemic, keeping their employees as safe as possible, keeping their customers as safe as possible. Well, we knew nothing about this COVID-19, this coronavirus. So it was really trial and error trying to adjust to, again, keeping best practices top of mind, making sure they were cleaning maybe a little bit more than they are used to, shutting down a little bit earlier so that they can restock shelves. I'm sure that you all remember the hoarding that happened at the beginning of all of this, and just trying to adjust their orders and responding to customer demand. So, there's no handbook for life, and there's certainly no handbook for a pandemic. That would have made, I think, the grocers world a little bit easier. General retailers that were considered, quote, non-essential, they obviously were forced to close. And, so that posed a bit of a challenge as well. Nobody plans to shut their business down for 2 or 3 months. Some were able to pivot and get themselves fully online. They were creative and really increased their presence on social media, and they were able to sustain themselves. Others, we have yet to see the full effect. We still have some members who may not be open, or they have very limited hours, and we're still facing, for the quote, non-essential retailers, they're still facing a limited number of customers that they're allowed to have in their store. So, when you're planning, obviously, for 100% capacity, you're seeing one set of numbers, and now we're not planning for that. We're looking at 25% of capacity after this enormous pandemic that has proved that life can certainly be lived online. So it's not just a struggle of saying, I need more people in my store, we're going to go back to normal. There is no normal for retail anymore. Unless your normal has everything to do with customer experience while they're in the store and a presence online, I think that we will see some of the more established retailers really succeeding, and then some more established retailers who don't have an online presence really struggling. So those are the first initial thoughts that I have about the future of retail. I'll apologize, it just started pouring here. Can you hear that?
A little bit, yeah.
Move away from the window here. Try that anyway.
So, Erin, we've talked a bit amongst Vermont credit unions about what things look like post-pandemic, when all the federal and state assistance is behind us and so on and so forth. I don't know how far down the road it is, but somewhere into 2021 or beyond, and what parts of business are going to look different because of either what people have become accustomed to, or creativity and finding new ways to do things. And when you referenced some merchants or retailers being successful right now and in the future, and then some having a lot bumpier road, you made me think about before all of this happened, there was this, at least among some Vermonters, this very strong shop local and all that kind of thing. Not necessarily anti-Amazon, but stay local if you can. What do you think happens with all of that attitude afterwards? Because, consumers everywhere have gotten accustomed to ordering so much online that things have changed a lot.
It has changed a lot. I think one of the um, one of the positives of Vermonters, I believe, they do want to support their local businesses and their local downtowns and their communities. I think the proof will show when the rubber hits the road, right? So maybe it's going to be a larger effort for retailers or downtown communities to remind people that retailers or those local businesses are still alive and well. It's going to take some effort to remind them, to remind customers, come back. We have what you're looking for as well. But it is going to be a heavier lift than it has been in the past, I believe. Who doesn't want to sit on the couch in their pajamas and order everything from, the big gorilla in the room. I don't order from that specific retailer online, but I know that that's unrealistic.
That's a good choice given your job.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Funny, my husband used to order from Amazon, and then we started dating, and I put it.
Stopped.
But I know that's unrealistic. I know that not everybody can be as much of a stickler as me when it comes to Amazon. I've got retailers who order from Amazon, so that's unrealistic again. But I think it's going to be, like I said, a heavier lift. It's gonna take creativity and hard work and a real drive to keep people engaged in their downtowns and their local retailers, and that's going to be where the experience comes in. You've got to be able to have different events and invite your customers maybe to an after hour event, or you're going to have to engage your customers online, whether through a social media or, advertising, etc., in ways that we haven't even thought about yet. And so that's got to be in the plan, right? That's how do we move forward? You've got to engage harder than you've ever had to before.
A lot of the credit unions online here and others in Vermont were issuers of SBA Paycheck Protection Program loans. And so and I know, they all know what their experience was with their business members that applied for those. But from your position, looking at the more global Vermont landscape, what do you think, what was the I don't know, overall results of that program? Woefully inadequate in sum total, or really greatly appreciated, or whatever in between?
I think there's absolute appreciation. The sheer fact that a retailer or any type of business could jump online, fill out, I think it was a 1 or 2 page document, send it off to their credit union, and get a response back. I think the application process, while not everybody had access to the money at first, I think the application process went pretty well. I think the frustration comes in the response from the federal government. I have no idea if I'm getting money or when I'm getting money, and then it just shows up in my account without any communication. So those were the responses that I heard. Also, that had having nothing to do with necessarily the SBA, but the short timeline and the unclear guidance that businesses received on how it can be used and when it can be used, and unclear and strict guidelines is what we heard a lot about. I have 8 weeks to spend this money, but my store is still closed. How am I supposed to be in compliance with this? But luckily we've got the fix. We've been provided a little more flexibility and leeway. But overall, it's been, I think, sheer appreciation and gratefulness that they've had access to funds. Obviously, it's never enough, right? But it's better than nothing, and I think that it's better than nothing. But I think that assistance from the SBA got retailers through to right now. Now they're depending on the funding from the CARES Act that has come through the state. So as long as the turnaround can be somewhat quick, I think we'll see a lot of retailers continue to survive. We won't see many thriving, I should say, but they will have a better chance of surviving.
Right.
And, as long as we can turn that money around, I think we'll be okay.
Good.
Yeah.
Hey, questions, folks, or comments from anybody? Anything at all?
Erin, this is John Dwyer at New England Federal Credit Union up in Williston. I'm curious what you've heard from your members of the association regarding their requests for payment assistance from their financial institutions. Have they had good success with that? Have they had, assistance that was helpful? Not certainly looking for any names, but the overall sense of what kind of support the Vermont businesses received.
So payment assistance in the sense of pushing back a loan payment.
Yeah, deferring payments for a few months, or maybe 3 months, maybe they need it again. Are they getting those kinds of things that they need?
So I've heard that a lot of retailers are receiving that type of assistance. The only concern that I've heard most recently surrounds the rental payments, and that's not necessarily through the credit unions or banks. It's more working with the individual developers or
landlords.
So I've heard a few positive responses about pushing back dates and working well with their banks or their credit unions. If I don't hear complaints, I take that as a good thing. So, and having heard a couple positive responses, that's really good.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A couple other questions that Joe had sent.
I had a quick question.
Yeah, sorry.
One of the areas that we were worried about, I've been worried about especially, are the clothing retailers and the restaurants. The restaurants have been trying to sell food by doing pickup food sales. Is that working for them? Is that keeping the restaurants going? Is it still a struggle?
So I have the restaurants that I have. I don't have a lot of restaurants as members. I have a small group of them, and many of them are also like delis within a retail store. So I would suggest reaching out to Betsy Bishop at the State Chamber. They're the ones that have the restaurant. The National Restaurant Association has a contract with them. I don't want to speak for all of the restaurants, but the restaurants that I have heard from, they've needed at least 50% capacity inside for seating. And now, the governor has allowed that. I think that they're the ones, again, that I've heard from are in a better position than if they were still at 25% capacity, obviously. I think that also from the members that I've heard from, the restaurant industry will suffer for several years. It'll take years for them to come back, just like retail. But as far as restaurants, like I said, the delis that we have and the few restaurants that we have, they were okay with the grab and goes or call in orders. Once they figured out the system, it worked. It's just figuring out the system, putting it into place, and getting customers on board with that system. So I think it was, a couple weeks of trial and error, or maybe a month worth of trial and error at the beginning. But then it seems like they were able to swiftly transition to, the phone orders or ordering online and paying with your phone or something like that. So,
Okay, thank you.
mm-hmm.
So, Erin, for financial services, credit unions and banks in Vermont, it seems like they all, deemed essential service providers, although they all closed down their lobbies, but, all their lobbies closed down by edict all at the same time. But they've all kind of migrated towards opening, although there's still, different time frames and whatnot, but they're all kind of heading in the same direction at the same time, regardless of whether you're a bank or credit union or whatever else. But, just driving around town where I live, looking at retail establishments, it seems to be really varied still. Some are open, some of the big box stores I drive by, and you'll maybe see a lot of what appears to be a lot of cars out front, and others look like they're still closed. And so, I don't know what my question is. I guess maybe it's just more of an observation that it seems like in retail it's more all over the place, and maybe subject just to individual owner or franchise owner preferences.
Yeah, and that has been, if you think about the big box stores, they have the marketing resources to put themselves out there. They run the ads on TV and remind you that they're open, or you can order online and pick it up in an hour, or you can have it next day shipped to you. That really puts the small businesses in this state and around the country, around the world, I would assume, at a disadvantage. Those businesses don't have the resources, and they certainly don't have the staff to constantly be beating consumers over the head, reminding them that they're there, So that goes back to this pandemic especially is forcing retailers, especially the small retailers, to be incredibly creative in how they are staying top of mind. I will share one success story with you, and I'll apologize, I'm slightly biased because she's a dear friend of mine, but Sarah DeFelice here in Montpelier, she owns Bailey Road. She has been phenomenal. She shut down her store rather quickly, but she worked around the clock getting every piece of product online. So she was online. She would have Instagram stories going 24 hours a day. She had Facebook posts, constantly. She was multifaceted and showed every aspect of not only the store, but also her life. So she was showing a little bit of the vulnerability of what she was going through as a store owner, and really creating a relationship with her customers. And it allowed her to cut that overhead, but also maintain not the same level of revenue, but because she was so creative and so active online, she was able to survive and do it pretty well given the circumstances. But it takes a lot for a small business to come up with the plan and execute it. And you don't see very many small retailers with the capacity, or I think there's something special that you need to have too. There's that sales mind, and being able to reach in there and find it within you it takes a lot of work if it doesn't come natural to you. So I think that, there are plenty of opportunities to help small businesses find that process. But it's going to take resources. And unfortunately, the big box stores, they have the resources. It's the chicken and the egg, right? You spend money, you're going to make money. I'm going to spend $3 million on advertisements. I'll make $3 million, but
Right.
small businesses can't do that.
Are there some sectors in retail, some portions of retail that probably have fared or are faring better now than others? Like for some reason, I'm assuming, nothing to base it on, that because, people can do things outdoors individually. Like I see people in my neighborhood driving off with kayaks on their cars, a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that sporting good type stores might be doing better than like strictly a clothing store, that kind of thing.
I think that there's some truth to that. Obviously, the grocery stores and the hardware stores, they were able to sustain themselves. They were able to stay open. Now that the weather has turned, yes, the sporting goods stores have shared that they are seeing a better, an uptick in sales, but it's certainly not where they had anticipated it to be. And you've got, Dick's Sporting Goods or, other big box retailers that can still continue to advertise and put themselves out. But, again, we go back to, we are Vermont, and I think there is a sense of supporting your community, and certainly the sporting goods stores have a really great following. As far as I think bookstores, they've been doing really well as long as they have an online presence. They've done fairly well. Again, not as they aren't where they would like to be, but given the circumstances. But yeah, I think that flower shops, they're really hurting. They did fairly well at the beginning, but then I think that there was some concern about, can people be delivering flowers, and are you allowed to drop them off at the hospitals or the nursing homes, and will they have to sit around for 3 days? But I think that, I think we're starting to see a more positive trend. Let's hope that it keeps going.
So what do you think is the long range effect of this current pandemic on the look of retail and grocers in Vermont somewhere years down the road? The way they do business, fewer number, all of that?
That's a fantastic question. I think obviously the new normal is absolutely the greatest challenge that retail is going to face. If you are not online, if you do not have some strong presence, or as close to strong presence as you are capable of, I think you will find struggles in your future. I think given the political situation, we will see more demands on the smaller businesses in the next few years. $15 minimum wage, paid family leave, and we need to get the point across that the small businesses just don't have the funds. But I think that those demands will only get louder and only get harder. And so I think we also, because of COVID and shutting down for a handful of months, I think we'll see anywhere from 10 to 20% of retail will close within the next 2 years. It's going to be a tough rebound, and you've got to give it all you got, and sometimes that's still not enough.
Right.
Outlook, I really hope I'm wrong, but outlook is not so rosy right now. I think that we're just starting to see the effects of COVID-19. In the past I'll say 3 weeks, we have heard of 5 members closing their stores. And I anticipate that is just the beginning.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, some of the most depressing discussions that we've had in these weekly meetings with credit unions is ones where we've invited economists to talk to us about the future. And you know, most of those aren't really exciting discussions.
No.
Although there are some bright spots, but certainly challenges yet to come.
Yeah, I have a question if I could.
Please.
I'm just curious, Erin, if you could talk at all about some of the challenges your members may have faced with employees, either on a safety level or fear of that and how they address those, and also on a getting them to come back to work.
Yeah.
They're making more money at home in some cases.
Yeah. That's been a struggle since the news broke that employees on unemployment would receive the additional $600 from the federal government. You know, there's also the aspect of employees who have children, and so they can't work. They can't work because they need to stay home because the daycare hasn't opened up yet. So it's multifaceted. Certainly, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, when everyone was learning about additional benefits, there were questions in the workplace. We received several phone calls questioning that. How can I get them to stay with me? You know, we encouraged members to apply for the EIDL loan. We encouraged members to get their application in for PPP and you know, get it in quickly, and hopefully you'll get it back quickly so that you can use that. There were questions about whether you could use PPP to provide a bonus or additional pay. And that took a while for us to get an answer on, you know, but we were strongly suggesting, you know, give them as much of an increase as you can to keep them, at least for the short period, in the sense that, you know, it's hazard pay, right? I have a handful of members. We sent out a survey at the beginning. I have a handful of members who were paying their employees $5 to $7 an hour more just to keep them there. I heard from a lot of members saying, they say that I'm not doing everything that I should be to keep them comfortable. I'm following the OSHA guidelines, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, which includes, you know, Vermont Department of Health. And I said, all you can do is document that. You know, there's only so much that a retailer or any business person can do. And we did our best to encourage members to document everything. Luckily, I think once the initial shock of the additional resources kind of wore off, people kind of settled back into work. You know, and I strongly believe that if you have a job, you would much rather have the job than at the end of the day staying at home for too long. And you know, if there were employees that did leave, I believe that there was plenty of opportunity to hire other employees that wanted the position. Obviously, employers have been looking for employees for well before COVID-19, but they've also been forced to be creative in filling the positions and maybe redesigning the positions to get the job done. Did that answer your question, Doug?
It does. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from anybody? Thank you so much, Erin, for joining us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
It's been great hearing some insights from a different sector of business, and we really appreciate it.
It's definitely been drinking from a fire hose. We have put together nearly a dozen different webinars for our members over the past few months. We have a handful of them in the works for down the road, including one for contingency planning and what happens if, God forbid, we have another pandemic. So,
Right.
you know,
Awesome.
if there are any questions, or if you feel that you might be able to provide some input to any of those webinars or provide some type of guidance, we are always open. We're not the professionals. We take in as much information as we possibly can and push it back out. And we do our best to keep our members as aware of as much information as possible. That's the only way that our members will survive. So, you know, if there's anything that you want to shoot my way, please, the more information, the better.
I think we've all been stealing from everybody else these days because that's
What you can do.
a benefit. And when you were saying we've all been, or you've been drinking from a fire hose, for a moment, I didn't think you were going to put fire hose on the end of that, just drinking, because I've had some of those days too.
Well,
Yeah.
there's that too.
All right.
We all have to keep our retailers alive, right?
Thank you so much, Erin. We greatly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you
Thanks
for your time. Nice
for
to talk
joining
with you
us.
all. Thank you.
I have just 3 minor updates for all the rest of you, and then you'll gain back another 20 minutes today. And that's that you probably already got notice, not only in the update that we sent out earlier today, but in other news that the Supreme Court addressed or denied the ABA's claim on the NCUA field of membership practices, policy, whatever you want to call it. So I'm sure we'll be getting more write-up and analysis on that this evening or tomorrow. You'll also see in an update that we send out this evening that the Supreme Court, I guess they rendered a bunch of opinions today, and another one was that they determined that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau director can be fired by the president, which I thought was the case already, but I guess it was, there's some provision in there that says for just cause, and so I guess the for just cause part is being jettisoned. So the CFPB director can, be hired or fired at the discretion of the president. Doesn't go so far as what some groups want, to have a commission instead of a single person running the CFPB. And then FinCEN today issued BSA guidance for all financial institutions that are dealing with hemp businesses, which I thought was exciting. I was just starting to go through it when we got on the line here, so I'll send out a link and some information on all of that to everyone. Last thing I want to let you know about is on the 13th of July, if that's the date, 2 weeks from today, I think it is, we've made arrangements with Angela Russell, who is the VP of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at CUNA Mutual, to be on the line with us. And she's putting together what her presentation is going to be, but she's going to be addressing the group about DEI, and knowing that some of you are probably deep into it already and some probably haven't even scratched the surface. So we should have a really good discussion on that. And I haven't really decided yet whether we're going to have a gathering like this next Monday. If we do, it'll just be like the 10 or 15 minute update without any focal point like this, because I assume some people are probably taking Monday instead of Friday off, and so it'll be kind of sketchy as far as participants. So with that, anything from anybody? Anything else? Thank you so much for joining us again today and for attending all these. Greatly appreciate it. Have a good rest of your week and have a great holiday weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good day.